Is everything good audio-wise? Because otherwise we'll just kick off.
I can hear you well, so yeah, let's start.
Amazing.
I mean,
Okay.
maybe the crowd wants to also join in the questions. If anyone can't hear, just let us know.
Yeah. So we're going to have a little bit of audience participation. We've got you're allowed to put messages down at the bottom in the question answer, and we just want to know if you've been in the crypto or blockchain industry for a year at least, or if this is the first time that you're hearing about DAOs or anything to do with blockchain.
Yeah, for us to get a little bit of a feel who is listening in and how deep or how introductory wise we have to talk about it. Yeah.
And whilst you guys are writing, I'm actually going to share my screen.
Thank you, Ines, for already answering. A little bit of an academic background, no technical knowledge. Well, I think for today, this is like an introduction to the DAO world. I mean, we can go deep in an introduction there even, but we won't talk code with you today. So that will be fun.
It will definitely at least touch shallow level of what a DAO is. I think it makes sense to just dive in, right? Is my screen being shared okay? Can everyone see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, I'm guessing. I saw your mouth moving, so I'm guessing that's the case. All right, perfect. So, welcome to our webinar on the state of DeFi and DAOs in 2021. I'll get into a little bit about our guest, Zeb Lelie, later on in the webinar, but as you can see, he's a spark with loads of energy, great experience in the industry, and it's going to be a great webinar. We're going to learn a lot. So first things first, what actually is a DAO? Well, a DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization, and there are multiple definitions. Well, the one that we chose today is a digital native organization. So it's just a group of people that gather on the internet and have no central management. So they're broadly known as leaderless. And they organize themselves based on automated enforceable rules on a public blockchain. And these rules are compiled on smart contracts, which is just if this, then that statements basically that give you control over assets, manage their use, and provide more automation. And the beautiful thing about a DAO is that it's very flat in its hierarchy. So each DAO member with vested authority can make votes on how the organization develops. So DAOs are a new way to organize for people with a common goal, regardless of whether it's commercial, non-profit, or even activist DAOs as well that we're starting to see come up now. And the decentralized decision-making allows things to be developed on, organized on a bottom-up rather than top-down structure. And the applications for DAOs are endless. The size of the industry, according to a research paper by UCM and Harvard, approximated that there are around 1,600 DAOs at the start of 2020. But as you may know, we had DeFi Summer in 2020, and we had NFT Fall in the beginning of 2021. And from there, thousands more DAOs have actually been created. So this number has actually dwarfed if they did a new research paper. And DAOs are already a multi-billion-dollar industry with some blue chips, such as AAVE, which on their own hold 15 billion in locked-in funds. And these organizations have been around for around 5, 6, 7 years, not a very long time, and they're already holding so much in value. And this is a trend that we're going to continue to see as DeFi DAOs especially have grown at an extraordinary rate, especially due to the innovation of yield farming, which is something that we'll definitely touch on in future webinars. So DAOs in general, they empower individuals through their novel way of using technology and flat hierarchies. And it can be amazing for community management, decision making, and local government can actually be integrated into public institutions. Actually, we're already starting to see some experimentation in public institutions using this technology. And DAOs can also have use cases outside of finance, such as being able to run a DAO-based Uber, where each driver actually has control over how the DAO Uber develops and how much revenue contribution they have. And then, of course, as we all know, there's DAOs that can create their own banks, basically, where it's run by the people that deposit their assets. One of the big issues that we definitely see at our organization is that DAOs don't actually have proper legal standing in a majority of jurisdictions. They're quite a novel corporate entity type, and typically under most jurisdictions, they're seen as a unlimited partnership or unincorporated partnership or an unincorporated association, which can have a number of legal risks if there are any disputes between internally in the DAO or between the DAO and another DAO or the DAO and another business. On top of that, the lack of corporate entity type also means that the DAOs often are not able to hold legal and real world assets. And this is obviously an issue as it limits the utility of the entity type of a DAO. On top of this, there's a lot of cross-jurisdictional issues, with some jurisdictions starting to have clearer laws for these organizations and others not. So the whole landscape of DAOs is very, very fractionalized at the moment, and more clarity is definitely needed. And that is one of the reasons why we set up WACEO. It's a non-profit organization, actually, with the goal of supporting blockchain-based organizations such as DAOs operate in compliance with regulation and providing them with tools necessary to create decentralized roadmaps in compliance with the law. And also we pull together the expertise and resources of our member DAOs in our association and service providers that we partner with to jointly lobby for the interests of DAOs with regulators too. As part of that, we have audits and coverages where we go over the issues that DAOs are facing. We support DAOs with their decentralized governance, providing them with policies and procedures. And we also provide training and arbitration if there are any disputes in between the DAOs and the organizations. In conclusion to this brief and quite light intro into DAOs, they are a very exciting new organization type that will definitely revolutionize the way that we work together. There's going to be a lot more of these in the future. And people are saying that people would rather set up a DAO than set up a limited liability company these days, just because of the utility that you get and the way that it really empowers all the individuals to work together and raise funds easier too. But right now there is still it's legally unclear regarding the frameworks, and this is something that our organization, our partners and DAOs are really looking to develop further. So the purpose of this webinar series, this is the first one, welcome. This is quite exciting for our team, is to provide activists and those working with to invite activists, DAO activists, and those working in the blockchain industry to discuss and provide information and perspectives to newcomers and experienced individuals on happenings in DeFi and the DAO sector. And we are very excited to introduce one of these individuals. Please welcome Zeb Lelie. In 2014, he started research in the blockchain space. And so he's definitely an OG. In 2015, he founded the Do Your Own Research CryptoWiki. And if you want to know about majority of the projects in the DeFi space, check out this website. It has a very comprehensive information and a lot of things that you won't be able to find too easily on the internet about how the governance of a DAO might work or its token. In 2016, he became research associate of Cyber Capital, where he's now the research lead. And currently he's an active participant and an advisor on-chain DeFi governance, which caused him to become a member of the Blockchain Founders Fund, which is a really, really exciting organization. And currently he's grants lead at Balancer Grant DAO. So we are very, 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 very excited to have you on our call, Zeb.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, that was a great introduction.
Our pleasure, our pleasure, our pleasure. I could have made that slide even longer, but we had to summarize it to make sure that we had time to actually dive into the conversation.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so one of the first questions that we wanted to actually kick off with is talking about the history of DAOs. We've obviously talked about what DAOs are and what they can provide society and the different types of DAOs that can come out, but we wanted to get a bit of understanding of where DAOs, as we know them, started from, and have a bit of an arc about where they're going from there.
Yeah, sure. And you're asking the right person. I studied history, so this is right up my alley. I'm a big fan of history because I think that history is a way of understanding where the world has come up until now. And if you understand the history, you might understand the current system a bit better as well. So also with DAOs, we have come quite a long way. The first DAO is already 6 years old. Well, some people, we also had this conversation offline. Some people would even call Bitcoin a DAO. I personally think for this conversation, it will be good to limit at least this definition towards like the DAOs that came a bit later, to not have it too confused. But I do get the idea. I mean, Bitcoin was the first decentralized protocol, and basically all of crypto is built on top of that. Now, in 2015, there was a project called BitShares. And if you have been around for a long time, you will definitely know BitShares. It was back then quite innovative. It was like in 2015. It was a new thing. You could trade different assets on their exchange, and token holders were able to govern it. But as happens often with new and experimental technology, this organization type, it didn't really work out. You can still find BitShares, but it has been, we would call it a dead project for years now. Then a bit later, you had Dash, which stands for digital cash, which again, right now is not really that big anymore, but at the time in like 2015, 16, was really, I really liked it a lot. It was a very innovative project. And what they did, for instance, which really touches upon what you already mentioned about the autonomy, they had that. So Dash is something like Bitcoin. It's digital cash. And they have an inflation through block rewards. And a part of that block reward, part of the inflation, Dash token holders were able to vote on what they could do with that inflation, with that value. And therefore, they could suddenly fund developing teams or marketing out of the inflation from their own blockchain. This was called a self-funding mechanism. And Dash is also the first DAO, really. They really use the terminology DAO, and they even incorporated a DAO legally. So I think this will also be a topic for in later webinars to really dive into these types of incorporation. I already saw someone in the question and answers also highlighted maybe actually, Nathan, maybe you want to take that question later on. But then, yeah, after Dash, of course, everyone has heard of Ethereum. And Ethereum has what are called dApps built on top of it, decentralized apps. And a lot of these decentralized apps started to adopt this DAO model. Then, for instance, you had the DAO in 2016, which is very infamous because it got hacked within the first month. I very much remember it. I was a DAO member and I was like, oh, whoa, what's happening here? And it was one of those hacks that you were just glued to the screen checking everything live. And then, luckily so, people realized that it wasn't necessarily the DAO organizational structure that failed, but smart contract itself had a bug in the code, an exploit. So later on, people still tried again. And for instance, some of you might have heard of MakerDAO, which is right now the project has created DAI, one of the biggest stable coins in the space, at least like decentralized stable coins. And they have a maker token, which is really a pure governance token. So then we start to get into governance tokens, which now is really huge. But this already started in 2017. And then in these last, I would say, last 2 years, the word DAO became way more known and way more used. And now, indeed, something like AAVE, they've also been around since 2017. I would say that since their V2, which is about a year old, they really start talking about real DAO, the AAVE DAO. So things have moved along. And then in this year, we even have the Wyoming legislature on DAOs in America. So we have come a long way, but I think we're still really at the beginning. I think we have a way longer way to go, but it's really exciting to see where we will grow towards. And who knows, maybe in the future we will have digital countries that are run by DAOs. That could be.
Wow, so much to unpack. You definitely
the history. Yeah.
Exactly. You definitely gave us a thorough timeline. And yeah, it was very interesting that you made the distinction, right, between what you're calling a decentralized protocol and then a decentralized autonomous organization. It'll be great if we could, before we dive into some of the questions in the group and about legality of that, it'll be great to understand a little bit of the nuances between the decentralized protocol and a decentralized autonomous organization.
Sure. I think that in the end, it's semantics. I mean, everyone is still trying to figure out what real terminology we should use. But the way I see it is like Bitcoin and even Ethereum, they are protocols with an ecosystem built on top of it. But all of these different projects that are built on top of it, they don't necessarily have an organization that brings them together. You have the Bitcoin Foundation, you have the Ethereum Foundation, but these are not necessarily organizations that really have a common goal together with all of the projects that are built on top of Ethereum. It's just one of the other organizations all together leveraging this technology. And with Bitcoin as well, you have, for instance, Bitcoin Core, which are the developers, and you have miners, and you have users, you have wallets, you have exchanges. They don't really have a DAO model on top of it. But if you look at dApps, which you can see on Ethereum, but now also on things like Avalanche or Terra or Solana, I mean, most new protocol layers have smart contract capabilities. Most of these dApps, they choose to go for a DAO model where the community can together come to conclusions or to figure out how to spend their treasury. But also some layer ones are also doing this. So Ethereum and Bitcoin, perhaps they were just too early. That could be. I mean, Vitalik started talking about DAOs, or writing, I should say, about DAOs after Ethereum was already launched. And you can see that other projects, they have listened. Like, for instance, Terra Luna, they have on-chain governance. Polkadot has on-chain governance through a DAO model. So, yeah, the lines are blurring in that sense. But I think for me personally, it is about having an organization where people come together to decide on the future of their project. That is the distinction.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, that distinction, because one of the significant differences that I definitely see is that with these layer one protocols, the decentralized protocols, people vote with their feet in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? So they don't have
Yeah.
necessarily a governance token that they can make decisions on. But whenever there's an upgrade, let's say to the Bitcoin protocol, like Taproot, people can choose to upgrade their client to be able to accommodate it, or they can choose to not and maybe fork in another direction. And this is just another way of governance, right?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the strong points also of blockchain technology in general is that you're always able to fork off. You can always copy the code and just start your own project. That is also possible with these dApps who have DAO governance because it's still open source. So even there, you could, if indeed, let's say the DAO votes for something that you totally don't agree with, you can always copy and fork off and make a case for why that is also a valuable proposition and try to create a community around it. So true, yeah, it's I love that, to be honest, personally, because it's really the opposite of what we are used to in a traditional system, especially with governments. You cannot really fork off a government. I mean, in the past, like really long time ago, as hunter-gatherers, you could just move, but that's not really possible anymore.
I think the UK would have something to say about that.
Yeah, well, and some people within the UK probably would have wanted to stay. I mean, this is again, it's
right.
and they probably don't really have a choice. I don't know if UK citizens were allowed to get a EU passport and move to Europe. I don't think so, to be honest. No. It would have been interesting to see how many actually migrated.
You're talking to one.
True indeed.
But talking about forking and starting different DAOs, one of the really interesting thing is that there isn't one type of DAO that you have, right? Of course, as blockchain innovation primarily came from finance, in the sense that Bitcoin was built as a decentralized peer-to-peer payment system. It's all about payments and finance. But we've started to see DAOs that don't just focus on finance. And it'll be interesting to just get a bit of insight into the different types of DAOs that you've started to see emerging now.
Yeah, and I think it is also the right timing to actually talk about this, because from my perspective, money was the killer app of blockchain for a long time. It just made sense. And now things are changing. People are understanding that blockchain, what it basically does is you have a decentralized global ledger where you can share digital value. And that can be anything. I mean, that doesn't have to be money. It can be other things as well. So I would say two things here with the different types of DAOs that are popping up. Number one, like people are also just using different structures. So even within the money DAOs, you have all different types of DAOs. You have like the very simple token governance, where one token is one vote, and you have like one portal where you can vote through. But now you also start seeing delegated vote structures with councils and council members making the decisions, but they have to get voted in. So even just the structures of a DAO are being really experimented with. And indeed, yeah, it's not only money anymore. So you have different sectors popping up, like we all know DeFi DAOs around finance, but now we are getting art DAOs with NFTs. So people want to also own some art, but they feel like they're priced out. Then they band together and they together bid on art. And I don't know if that's something that happened in the past. I mean, I can imagine like museums coming together and getting some money and trying to get art for them. But this is really global and way more bottom up. So I like that. Then another thing, which is a famous example, is DAOs around journalism are being created with Bankless DAO, which was a newsletter that's very famous within crypto that now decentralized and basically gave the ownership to the community of readers. Interesting one. Then another one are, for instance, insurance DAOs, which actually is sort of going back to the past, like the historic mutual aid funds, especially in the UK. That was really a big thing like 100 years ago. And it's happening again, but now on a global scale, that people pool together funds. And if someone, well, in this case, at the moment, still like gets hacked, but it is changing to other things. For instance, also with crop insurance for farmers. If one has, well, a problem, then the rest pulls in, and now global. Another one is freelancer DAOs. So people who have all kinds of expertise coming together and trying to do it without trusted intermediaries. You even have DAOs that create on-chain testaments, like your will for when you die. So very interesting stuff as well. And then without having to need to go to a notary, it's all on-chain and you don't have to trust anyone that it will actually happen. So the main point is that any service where you before had to trust an intermediary, you can do this instead through a trustless DAO solution where you can be one of the peers within this network. So there's even a DAO focused on chess, believe it or not.
Definitely seen some of these DAOs that you're talking about, and it's quite exciting actually. It's almost like people have a hobby or an interest and they choose to just DAOify it because of the openness of it, the bottom-up structure, the lack of disinformation and more transparency, right? And it's really interesting. Enes has put in a few questions, which I'm going to quickly dive into regarding the development of DAOs which are outside of just DeFi. And one of them that she's mentioned is a DAO that is used in regards to privacy. So right now there's a big push towards the concept of self-sovereign identity, data sovereignty, where people have control over their data, which is really aligned with blockchain, because blockchain enables you to have sovereignty of data. It's just that this data is a financial value, but this data could also be personal data, right? And just to answer your question really quickly, yes, definitely a DAO, a group of people, individuals can come together, decide that if their data is being used, they need to be remunerated based on certain terms and conditions. And different organizations can choose to work with the organization to be able to do that. And we're actually working alongside a DAO which is looking to do that, actually, called Checked. And we will invite them onto a webinar because they're doing some really, really exciting things, actually.
Yeah, there are a couple doing this already, and it just makes total sense. So how I see this is right now we are really looking into money with blockchain, but the idea, the concept of private and public keys, which basically is this, that you have a public key that you can add some of your information that you are okay with to share. And then with your private key, you can determine how much you are sharing. And I think this might even be used in combating fake news. Like, for instance, journalists could write something and then link it to their public key. And then other people, when they want to quote them, they can link it and people can check if the journalist indeed signed it with their private key to see if it was indeed this person who has said that. So I think private public keys are going to be huge for the next 10 years. And we might even one day be like, yeah, so weird. We started with that it just was money, but now it's everywhere.
Yeah. And I think that's the really exciting thing, that we're just at the precipice of it, right? We're just seeing a lot of these ideas starting to come out, and it's the perfect time to get involved, which is perfect because this rolls on to, or segues into my next question, which is, why do you, Zeb Lelie, conceptually, what excites you about DAOs the most?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think in that sense, it is quite close to what excited me about blockchain in the beginning in 2014. The idea is just really interesting of having a global, cross-border, open to anyone organization. It is opening up participation to anyone with the internet. And this is an experiment that fits the internet ethos. It's how I see it. This is on the roadmap of our evolution. This is just the next step. So that's, yeah, the concept of it just fits where we are going.
Yeah, definitely.
And
So
I mean, if you want me to say more why it gets me excited, because that's sure. Like DAOs are full of innovation. It's
yep.
the governance experiments and the people who join right now, they are highly intelligent and very flexible people, the people who are daring to already make the step right now. It is the most interesting sector to work in, basically, period. These people understand so many aspects of society. Discussions, they combine economy, philosophy, sociology, politics, and then they try to apply it all towards a world built on individual freedom. And there is no force with it all. You can choose which DAO you want to work with or want to use its services from. No borders or government stopping you, and it's all peer-to-peer. And the choice is really huge. So it's clear that the world has been waiting for this.
Yeah, definitely so. Yeah, and you're catching the zeitgeist, actually, in the sense that being in the DAO space is interdisciplinary, right?
Mm-hmm.
It allows you to not see a box, right? Like not to be in a box or be outside a box, to just not see a box. And you meet so many people from different backgrounds, right? And different walks of life, but you're all excited about the same things, about building organizations which are going to improve society. And I know I'm kind of answering the question myself now.
I want to add something here, which just popped in my mind. I mean, I don't want to say that you have to be like the smartest person alive to join, because it's very early. There's so much to do. There's really something for everyone. But I do think if Michelangelo would live right now, because he was like he did everything, right? I think he right now would create NFTs, be a developer, and be what I call a DAOplomat. I mean, I do think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we might have to touch on DAOplomats later on, actually.
Sure.
This is quite a cool question, actually. What is your favorite DAO currently, and why?
Sure. Let's see. Okay, so I'm a bit biased. I mean, I'm working for the Balancer Grand DAO at the moment, so that's obviously my favorite. But Balancer is, in my opinion, a very, very innovational project. But I'm biased. Now, other projects that I really like at the moment, because Balancer is money again, and I think there are multiple things going on that I like. For instance, you also have Sushi Swap, which is a place to exchange tokens, but I just love it that they bought sushi.com. If you type in sushi.com, you go to a crypto project. I mean, crypto is taking over the world. It's amazing. What I like about them is that they are really turning all the traditional models upside down. So for instance, it's very normal within, I would say, startup worlds that you go to VC funding to get your project off and running. And Sushi did none of that at the start, at least. And now someone said, let's involve some VCs, let's get them to buy our governance token, and we will give them a little bit of a premium for doing this because they will bring back a lot of value to us. And what happened? Because this is what happens always. This is always the case. And what happened? People within the community, they stood up and they were like, no, it's not needed anymore. We don't need these VCs. We are the VCs now. And even one VC stood up and said, hey, we have been with Sushi since the start. We believe in it long term. Why are you giving this to these other groups with a discount? We believe in it so much. We will pay a premium. We will pay more to get these tokens. So it really shows how how people believe in this and
Yeah.
how it's how much of a community it is. Then two other ones that I really like is Jenny DAO, that is the NFT DAO that is buying art together. I love their logo and I love their whole spirit. And one that I think should definitely be mentioned is Gitcoin, because Gitcoin is, in my opinion, a very important project. What they do is anyone can donate crypto towards Gitcoin grants, and they go towards open source development within the space. And to me, what it shows is that because it's really successful, it is really, really successful. People are doing this a lot. People are donating, grants are going out all of the time. So much technology is being created, and it shows that things are really changing. It's kind of like Kickstarter, but people always said that open source technology is underfunded. That has always been the argument. For instance, with you have Windows, you have Mac, and you have, help me out here quickly, Ubuntu
Linux.
is one of the clients, Linux, exactly. And Linux underfunded, and here, Gitcoin is showing that it can be different, and they DAOified. So that's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing that's really exciting, actually. The fact that DAOification is not just about bringing communities together, but it's about having the necessary resources to grow that community. At the end of the day, you do need capital in any organization that you have, and this just creates a way for people that believe in it all around the world to be able to invest and get involved as well. It really closes that line between investor and participator, which is really, really exciting. And in line with funding of DAOs, I am aware of the time, so I'm gonna make sure we have time to actually go through some questions at the end. But I wanted to ask about funding for DAOs, because before we did talk about a few different ways that DAOs can be funded, and we've talked about DAOification. So a company deciding to transition into a DAO as well. It would be great to hear a little bit more about that, actually.
For sure. So I would say that most DAOs, they get funded by the initial DAO token supply that they mint. So what happens, like for instance, so with Bitcoin, what we know is you have a block reward and inflation comes for until like another 100 years or so. And then all inflation is over, and then we have 21 million Bitcoin. Now with these dApps, with a lot of these projects, they have from the start an allocation with different groups getting different types of portions of the total supply. And often right now, an allocation is preserved for the treasury or for development. So I would say that is usually where they get funded from. But of course, then the question arises, why would these tokens have any value? And I would say that this can happen by a public or private sale, so that other people already bring value to buy these tokens. Then there comes the token price, so that can happen. But what also happens is that in the end, DAOs get funded by the revenue they create with their core products and services. And that also means that people who hold these governance tokens, in some cases, are going to get a bit of this revenue share back to the token holder itself. So also some of that revenue can go towards the DAO. So the revenue in a lot of cases gets split between the DAO treasury and token holders. Oh, all right, Nathan is back. And of course, what I just mentioned, some get funded by donations like Gitcoin. That happens as well. And I think you can see these token distributions a bit like when a company goes public and you can buy shares. I mean, these shares also come out of nowhere and they have value. And of course, it doesn't completely come out of nowhere. No, these DAOs create revenue. They create value, and that's why there is a price for these tokens.
Yeah, And we were talking earlier, actually, in line with the different funding routes that these DAOs can take, about how there could be a time where companies, big traditional companies, might want to DAOify some of their processes. And we already saw that happen this year, actually, with one of the biggest exchanges called Shapeshift. And their CEO, Eric, decided to DAOify the whole process, created these tokens, and they were given to the users, the team, the supporters.
He's a hero.
Genuinely a true hero, because he exited the community. That's what they call it. And this is something that I would say we're really excited about as well, because we really support during that process, because it takes a lot of operations and policy building to actually do so. It's not as simple as turning a switch on. It's a lot of experimentation and push and pull.
And also because these are traditional companies, they have links towards regulation already. So making this step is definitely difficult. Like creating a DAO out of nowhere, some just do it, and then they see like, well, hopefully we grow big enough that we can handle it when push comes to shove and we have to think about regulation. But if you are already a company and you move into the DAO world, then basically you have the eyes already on you, and then you really have to get it right. Otherwise, it's going to be a big mess. But I think in the end, it's worth it. And that's basically, I think, what you were going to go towards. Like, why would a company do this? And why is this so interesting? But I think what we see with DAOs is that certain parts of DAOs have shown to be more efficient. You need less people to run it, and you can get more revenue because it's all on chain, and you get a bigger reach because it's global. You get a whole new pool of workers, or at least let's call them for what they are in the DAO world, contributors, because anyone can start contributing and they can get rewarded with the token for what they have done as a contributor. So then they become stakeholders, literal stakeholders within this DAO. So I think we will see a lot more from it, but it has only just started.
Definitely so. Let's go for the last question before we open up for the question Q&A. Feel free, guys, to put any questions inside the message. I know that I've already started answering one or two, but we'll give a proper look at them after this question.
Also, if there is something that we discussed that was not clear enough, just ask and we will get into it. Yeah.
Appreciate that, Zeb. Yes, so the last question is, what factors do you think are going to win out? So what factors are going to be important in deciding whether traditional institutions, whether public or private, will actually choose to become DAOs?
Yeah, this is the big question, and I like the question a lot. Thanks for asking it. It is a difficult question as well. I have 2 points there. So number one is regulation, and perhaps not the way most people think I'm going to answer it. So the stance of governments will actually determine the pace at which DeFi turns into what I call PriFi, private finance. The more regulation will try to curb this technology, the more it will be pushed into unregulatable territory. And the technology to do so exists. So the genie is out of the bottle, and people understand what benefits decentralization brings. This can't be stopped anymore. So interestingly enough, the government can make it very difficult for themselves. And we will see which government is smart enough to adopt instead of fight. So that's number one. The government has it in their own hands as well. Number two, I think DAOs, they really need to think of more engaging and better ways of distributing their governance tokens, because if you don't distribute the governance tokens well enough, then you're not decentralized, and then you're basically the same as a traditional company again. And then what did we do it all for? And like I talked a little bit earlier about the different allocations, I would say a bunch of DAOs at this point are just not really decentralized. And I think it's also a difficult thing. Also, for instance, the voter turnout is quite low at this point. And I think that's a global issue, not only in DAOs, that's just in general is an issue. But there are ways, like the whole idea of Bitcoin is that it's built on game theory to keep all the participants honest and moving towards the right goal. And I think people are trying to do the same with governance in DAOs. And we just have to see what these experiments will bring. But that is something that will be a factor in if this experiment will take over the world or not.
So successful regulation and then successful participation. Decentralization. Very, very, very interesting. Zeb, this has been paradigm shifting. It's always great talking to you. Always got amazing nuggets. And I think it'll be great if we take the next, got about 8-7 minutes now to go through some questions that are here. So thank you for the participation, Ines, Connor, and Aminus. You've got a range of backgrounds here, but we'll kick off with the question regarding US state legislation on DAOs. And yes, definitely the state of Vermont and also the state just this year of Wyoming have recently released legislation to give DAOs corporate entities, but there's also legislation in Malta in Europe. It's a different type of entity type. They have a different framework where it's not really an entity, it's there's a representative for the DAO. But yeah, the question is, why can't they all just register in those states and be good to go? Well, a big issue there is recognition, right? And legitimacy. Because just because an entity is recognized in one state doesn't necessarily mean that it'll be recognized in other states. Of course, there's the legal principle that in every jurisdiction, whenever they are looking at a foreign entity type, they should find the entity type in their jurisdiction, which is closest to that. But with DAOs, because it's so novel, and you can have an entity where you don't actually know the individuals who are part of that, this creates increasingly difficult issues with accountability and actually knowing who was the bad actor and how to not penalize the entire entity for one bad individual. So this is one issue that, even though we're going in the right direction and we have entity types that can represent DAOs, there still needs to be further clarification, legal clarification, how we deal with this accountability issue.
And I would add there is that not all DAOs want to incorporate in America. That's also a thing. Not everyone wants to be legally binded by a corporation in America. So that's also a thing. And indeed, Nathan highlighted a good point that, I mean, most DAOs have like a couple public speakers like me, but there are also plenty who are pseudonymous and who don't want to. So that's indeed for each DAO to decide for themselves if they want to take that risk, I suppose. And yeah, also indeed, like Nathan says, registering one state doesn't mean you're done for the whole world with all the activities that you are undertaking.
Yeah, let's not even start talking about the tax issues, right?
Exactly. Oh, and by the way, I mean, for everyone who lives in America, I feel for you. The tax issues around crypto, they are horrible. I can't imagine having to think about every transaction I make being a taxable event. That's wow.
Yeah, the infrastructure bill is definitely a game changer in just understanding how
Yeah,
close
it's only
people
going to
is
get
getting
worse.
to the space. Right.
Indeed.
This is just
Yeah,
the
I mean, the
start.
people who do in America, the people who are still using crypto, I mean, that shows how really mind blowing this technology is. I mean, why would you want to go through all of that hoops? Well, because apparently it is way better than the traditional finance system.
Still more lucrative. So we got two other really exciting
Yeah.
questions, actually. How can HSBC onboard a DAO? I'm guessing as a client to open a current account, I assume. And this goes into the
Yeah.
direction of what Zeb was saying, in the sense that for a bank to onboard a DAO, there would need to be a certain level of accountability. This accountability typically is seen through the regulation of KYC laws and AML laws to understand the activities that the individual or the entity is having with the bank. So there would need to be a bridge between this traditional finance entity of HSBC and this DeFi innovative entity of a DAO to allow that accountability to be there, some type of KYC hub. And we're already seeing some innovation in this area. It's very nascent still, such as the AAVE Ark, where they allow institutional investors to be able to have access to the AAVE DAO pools. But over the next few years,
there is a but there. AAVE Ark is permissioned and has whitelist and blacklists. So it's not open to anyone. And even for these banks, I mean, they can play around with it, they can get comfortable with it, but they aren't having the full benefits of the decentralized blockchain system.
Completely agree. And this is the distinction, right? Permissioned and permissionless, registered and unregistered. And I think that dichotomy will continue to evolve and grow over time, depending on the use case of the DAO.
Yeah, agreed.
And then I think this is beautiful. We've got time for the last question. Oh, this is for you, Zeb. What do you make of the new batch of legislation regulating the field that have cropped up lately, EU specific, I believe? Promising because acknowledging it as a needing to be regulated or slowing down innovation. And I believe this is in reference to the proposed MiCA and the Data Governance Act and the Data Act. Yep, it'll be great to get your insight on that.
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I have debates around this a lot. And also within, for instance, a company that I work with, Cyber Capital, the crypto fund, where, I mean, we have different departments in the fund, of course, and different departments have different opinions. So it really depends what your look is on how you interact with crypto. And I think that in general, it's good that at least they are talking about it. But there is also, I don't necessarily want to say that it's slowing down innovation, because as I said, I actually think if regulation comes in quick, it will speed up innovation, but it might not mean innovation in the direction that governments want it to go towards. So I think this will just mean that certain really motivated and ideological DAOs and projects will move to more private-based technologies. And I think that regulation, we do have to look at regulation as, sure, maybe right now it's okay, but you never know where the government grows towards, and then they have all your information, and what will they do with it then? And I think privacy in that sense is really important for a democracy even to function. So right now, there has been, as they call it in crypto, FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, already for years about privacy coins becoming illegal or not. And it is still unclear, to be honest. It is still unclear. So I think with regards to the question, I think that, I mean, it was time, but I think it won't slow down innovation. People will just build more. People will
Yeah.
build more and more, and it will grow even faster. And then let's see what will be bigger sooner. I mean, I do envision I don't want to call it a fight because I don't know if it will be a fight, but I do
Mm.
envision a competition between the state and the network. And this is just part of it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's going to be a lot more conversations happening. I
Yeah.
believe.
More and more and more.
Yeah. There's even.
What do you think, Nathan? I am
I
curious
was.
to your opinion.
I have my reserved opinions. I don't have a lot of time, but one thing that I will say is hi-fi, and this is a new term to coin hybrid finance, which links traditional finance with
Yeah.
DeFi. I'm going to leave you guys with that so that we don't overstay our time. Zeb, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. And this is just the first webinar of WACEO. We're going to have a lot more where we're going to go over and deep dive into some of the topics that me and Zeb were only able to touch on a shallow level. And looking forward to seeing you guys in the next webinars.
Lots to
We're going
learn.
to definitely, so we're going to share our contact details briefly if you want to reach out to us. Bear with. I'm going to just share it quickly. And then we'll just roll out. People can leave when they need to, but please do find our contact.
Exactly. You can find me on Twitter, Zeb DYOR. You can also scan that one. You go to the wiki. And of course, if you think that investing is all way too difficult, you can always think about something like cyber capital and still be part of this new revolution.
Definitely so, definitely so. You guys are doing some great stuff and for a long time. And on our side, do visit WACEO.org. We support DAOs and blockchain-based organizations that are looking to exit the community, that are looking to build decentralized governance in compliance with specifically EU law. We've got a Telegram that we're starting to grow out, and you can find that with this QR code. And if you want to email us any questions, or if you're interested in what we do, then feel free to send us an email, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the next webinar.